Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Survivor Stockwatch podcast for the finale of Survivor 42. I'm your host, Taran Armstong, and with me to talk about the finale and give some final ratings for the season, it's my man, Brendan Meyer. How you doing, Brendan?
Man. Oh, it's good. Yes, I heard on Know-It-Alls, Rob called me Brendan the Actor Meyer. It sounded like Dwayne the Rock Johnson. So I was like, maybe that's it's my official RHAP name now. It's like I can see it in little little quotes in between my name. But yes, happy to be back on the pod, man. This is awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I believe you joined me for the season 40 finale as well, right?
Yeah, it was the season 40 finale, and then there was definitely an episode in 41 too, but I don't remember what number.
Yeah, I don't remember which one it was.
But yes, second finale. So this is good. 2 out of 3 finales. It's good.
All right. Well, we are here to talk through a bit of the finale. I've got a couple sound clips here and there, and then we will we'll rate the final 5. So how these ratings work on the Survivor Stockwatch is that we rate the players from 1 to 10 based on how well we think they're doing in the game. 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. But of course, the game's now over. So it's not really how well they're doing in the game. It's more how well did they do in this finale specifically, but also kind of the whole game, but mostly this finale, I would say. And we'll basically rate the winner's performance and so on and so forth with the rest of the final 5. But first, there was 3 hours of content here that we got through. Starting with what I thought was very appropriate. We opened the episode with Mike and Jonathan talking about how, oh man, Lindsay really should have played her idol for Omer, right? What a doofus. Why didn't she play it?
Why didn't she use her idol to save her ally? That would have been
who doesn't do that? Who would use their idol on somebody that's not their ally and make themselves look like a fool?
Yeah.
And Lindsay, like us, is really ready to go.
Don't get in my way. I'm balls to the wall, going all out.
That's us in this podcast.
That's right. That's the new name of the podcast, right?
Balls to the wall, going all out. What does that mean?
All out with Taran Armstong.
Balls to the wall.
Yeah, you've really changed my life because I'd never thought about it before. You've actually really, I've never had that thought, and I've heard that saying, and you've actually really, I never interrogated that before.
Yeah. Like, are you throwing a ball at a wall?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like a dodgeball thing. I don't know. Does somebody know?
Somebody's gonna mention us on Twitter and tell us, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like any speculation gets in a weird area, man. I don't know.
Look, there's a lot of different ways it could go. But even then, really,
Jeff Probst would use balls to the wall in a sense. It'd be interesting. He's the guy who loves, talking about balls.
So Lindsay's ready to go, and she needs to be ready to go because she basically needs some form of immunity to survive this vote. Theoretically, Lindsay has a couple of outs, I think. One is she could get both Marianne and Romeo to vote to keep her over Jonathan if Jonathan doesn't win immunity. It doesn't seem like Romeo is super interested in it, though. He sees her as the bigger threat to win, which I think is correct. Romeo, the only person in the game, in the entire game, to finally say, like, yeah, I think Jonathan's easy to beat in the end. Like, thank you.
I thought he was too busy dropping the bombshell, man, that he has an idol, which sent ripples through the game and changed everything. As you saw, he came up with a huge move at Tribal where he was sorry, not at Tribal, at Camp, where he dropped the that was very funny to me. Just that he comes out and is like, just so you know, guys, you can't vote for me. And then he's like, this is the greatest move of all time. And everyone else is like, cool, yeah, all right. Great. Let's go back to the game.
It was such a disappointment. You could see the palpable disappointment on the faces of the jury when he pulled out the idol. They were like, oh! And then he was like, but it's fake. And they were like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
What are you getting your hopes up for?
We don't have to jump ahead because I know we're sort of going in order. But that was a weird moment where he almost owned himself at Tribal. You know what I mean? Like he almost like made it worse where he was like, actually, I have been playing the game all along. Like he basically tried to do what Marianne did right later. I have an idol you didn't know about. And everyone's like, really? And he's like, no, I'm just kidding. I got nothing.
Imagine if he had saved it until Final Tribal. And then when Marianne pulls out her idol, he's like, oh, I also had one. But I don't have the notes for it or anything. I threw those away.
That would have been incredible if you would have tried to do that too.
Because Marianne also pulls out the notes and stuff. But it makes me wonder, could you make a fake idol, pull it out at Final Tribal,
I had this
and just not have the notes and just be like, and I had this in my pocket the whole time?
Well, my favorite part was, I think it was Mike, right? Didn't he say like, yo, man, you had balls of steel not playing it this whole way? Because yes, of course he would have played it. Like he's been on the wrong side of the numbers so many times. He's been the decoy so many times. Like if he had an idol for cycles and cycles of votes, it feels like he definitely would have played it at some point. It didn't even make sense.
Yeah, balls of steel, just like putting those balls of steel to the wall. Kenzie in the chat says, first attested in the 1960s in the context of aviation, balls to the wall, probably coined by pilots whose throttle levers had round ball-like tops, for whom putting the balls to the wall, the firewall of the aircraft, meant making the aircraft fly as quickly as possible.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's wild.
So it's kind of like pedal to the metal, but like on a plane.
Yes. But I guess most of us have driven a car. Not all of us have done the full aviation. Yeah. I guess that's the difference. It's funny to think about what sayings now that we say in 2022 that make perfect sense to all of us, and that will be very confusing to people in podcasts in 70 years. Whatever.
Kind of strange that it caught on. Like pilots were like, oh yeah, I really put the balls to the wall.
Yeah.
And then some non-pilot was like, that resonates with me.
Trying to be cool. Yeah. They're trying to be cool. They're like, oh, these cool pilots keep saying balls to the wall. Let me go off this. Let me try this out.
Oh boy.
Well, thank you for that. That's great. Thanks to who found
Yes, thank you, Kenzie.
Yeah, thanks, Kenzie.
So Lindsay's in a position. She's got to win. There's an advantage. There's put on a new beach. There's an advantage that they can find to give them an advantage in the upcoming immunity challenge. And immediately, Marianne tells us she wants to go to the end with Lindsay, and so she wants Lindsay to get this advantage. And I'm like, what?
Yeah,
you do. Because I was saying last week, like, Marianne just won this thing. All she needs to do is get Lindsay out.
Yeah.
And then the episode opens with Marianne being like, nah, I want Lindsay.
Which is fascinating. But she addresses later, right? In the final Tribal, which is interesting. Yeah, because you're right. It is this thing where, and again, you never know, I guess, till you see it. But it seemed like, yes, all she had to do was get rid of Lindsay, and she would beat any of the other people in the final three. And so, yeah, it turned out to be absolutely true. So, yeah, keeping Lindsay or not, and sort of the decision that Marianne has to make in this first cycle of the finale was huge. It could have been a catastrophic mistake.
Yes, and she actively sabotages the riddle solving of the entire rest of the group. They can't figure out the unscrambled or the scrambled word sleeping, which also, like, was it that important? Like, did they have to know the full phrase before they left? Was that part of the rules? It might have been.
Maybe they had to recite it out or something.
Because, like, I feel like you gotta know. Sleeping was not necessary, Yeah,
the giant's toe or whatever. What was that? I can't remember now, but it was like
the sleeping giant's toe.
Giant.
Like, a giant's toe. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, that was so funny. I thought it was so funny when Lindsay gets it and leaves, and immediately Mike just goes, "Okay, let's work together." Like everyone was pretending, right, that they all were trying to do it individually, and then as soon as Lindsay gets it, everyone's like, "Oh, okay, fine." That's just everyone. It was very funny to me.
Okay, Jinx says that they did have to have it written up before they went, which makes sense. But also, like, is sleeping a difficult one to like nail down? Like, it has ing, which is one of the most common like string of letters that you put ing at the end, and now it's just sleep.
Yeah, you'd think if they had the other ones that then you could get there. You know what I mean? Like if they solved all the other ones, wouldn't you be able to figure out something toe? I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. Maybe that's the not enough. That's why that's Taran. That's because this is the toughest season of Survivor ever, man. That's the monster. That's the monster.
I think also probably they filmed this before like Wordle was a thing, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
they
now
really
we're-
would have been up on
now-
this if they had been into the
Oh, man.
Wordle.
Are we gonna
situation.
get is Wordle's influence gonna be on Survivor 43?
Yeah.
I actually, that feels like such a Jeff Probst thing to be in an interview, be like, yo man, I'm always playing Wordle and the kids love Wordle. And so I was like, how do we bring Wordle to Survivor? Like I could totally see that being like a Jeff Probst interview in a few months.
I was thinking about who
Chat.
the monster really is, and then
Yeah.
I saw this weird image on Twitter being posted, all those green boxes,
Yeah.
and then I realized the monster was Wordle all along.
I feel like there is got to be some kind of Survivor like version of this where you're like trying to like. I definitely feel like this is something they could co-opt, like trying different things, and you have to run back and get a different piece if you get one wrong, and like if it comes, I don't know. I just feel like there's probably something they could actually do.
I feel like it could work as a challenge.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
I don't know if they have to pay like licensing fees to what the New York Times.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of like bootleg
That's
Wordles
very
out there
true.
now, so yeah.
See, I talked about playing Wordle at one point, and then I think it might have been Chappelle. Somebody told me, like, oh, there's more. There's Dordle and Quordle and Octordle, and it keeps going.
Yeah.
I tried them out. Those ones are more fun. Gotta say.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean,
More words the better. As long as they fit on your screen. As soon as they stop fitting on your screen, no fun anymore.
Yeah.
That's fair. But look, on Survivor, you got plenty of real estate. You got a whole island.
That's what I'm saying. This is a good idea.
So I love we see the moment where Lindsay like recognizes that she's standing right next to the sleeping giant's toe, and she's like, sleeping giants.
Yeah, she's literally facing away from it. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Honestly, her thinking was not that bad. The idea of like a sleeping giant being a fallen tree, like that actually did make quite a bit of sense. It's just she didn't realize it was literally a rock shaped like a giant.
Makes a lot more sense than looking for a toe shaped rock. Yeah.
Actually, I was with her for a minute there. I was like, yeah, it's probably in one of these roots.
Yeah, I would have done the same probably. So she gets the advantage, and I mean, in another world, I think this is like, oh, Marianne lost the game by helping Lindsay get this advantage.
Yeah, I mean, because Lindsay was very close, and I mean, editing is editing, so you never know. But it seemed like there was a big moment in the challenge where Lindsay dropped the thing and had to like go back and start again. And I mean, she looked very close. I mean, it looked like she was the distance it would have taken to do that away from Mike. That's what it looked like.
I can't imagine being in that position and feeling. And granted, like she was still probably like either Final Four immunity and or fire making away from getting into Final Three, and even then she also would have had to contend with Marianne in Final Tribal unless she planned to take Marianne out, which I think would have been a tricky proposition for anybody at that point. But man, it just feeling like if I just hadn't dropped that plank,
I know,
like I would maybe be $1 million richer.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough when players get the advantage in the must-win challenge too. It's like Malcolm in Philippines, which again, his advantage didn't help him with everything, with that whole thing. But still, it's tough when you feel like you've done everything you should do. You're like, oh, I also got the advantage, and you just can't close the deal. It's like extra. It hurts extra, I think, when you feel like so much went your way.
Yeah.
At least, yeah.
So she gets the advantage, and luckily for them, that this is not only immunity, but it's also reward.
Pasta.
You guessed it. You guessed it.
Spaghetti.
Garlic bread.
Garlic bread?
You want some meat sauce?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
How about some cake?
Yes.
Little salad?
Yes.
And a red one.
Yeah.
Oh wow! Wouldn't it be great? That's a wait. You should be a waiter at a restaurant. Just keep offering.
Yeah, he'd be a great waiter.
The best part is after all that, the punchline is Mike wins immunity and goes, and you got that pasta. And he goes, oh yeah, I almost forgot about that. Remember that was it?
Don't worry.
You've also earned
Oh,
pasta.
I forgot
about that. Oh, God.
I blew your joke. I'm sorry. We should have. See it's all real. This is all genuine. It's not
I mean,
the podcast is real.
Just
Not scripted, because I totally ran over the bit.
In case you were worried. Yeah, we haven't scripted this hour and a half podcast. Yeah, no, Jeff would be a great waiter. You'd be like, what are the specials? And he'd be like, oh, I've got some specials for you.
Pasta.
You guessed it. You guessed it.
Spaghetti.
Garlic bread. Garlic bread? You want some meat sauce?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
How about some cake?
Yes.
Little salad?
Yes.
And a red one.
Yeah.
You'd be like, actually, none of that sounds super great to me. Is there anything else?
Grilled cheese back at camp.
Oh,
It's like the one person, right, in the friend group that like won't eat. They're just like, they're still just going grilled cheese. You know what I mean? It's like oh no, they're just like, I just need a grilled cheese. I don't care.
yes. So this is a pretty fun challenge, I think. Lots of like it's got the physical component, it's got the puzzle to it. It comes down to just one piece. But it did feel like even though it was one piece, like the pieces were taking a while.
It's hard to know. Yeah, Marianne was also very excited for this challenge. That was a trend of this episode. Was her, I wonder if this was something that was happening more often, because maybe either I'm forgetting or not. I don't feel like she was calling out the challenges all through the season.
The rest of them were like, stand here and hold a thing.
But maybe she knew the name. Some of them might have had names too, though. Like, I'm just wondering if Marianne was that locked in all the way through, or if that was a special thing here in the home stretch.
What was interesting to me about the puzzle was that typically with you want to start with the edges because that's then easier to fill in the middle. But this is a vertical puzzle, and structurally they were filling out like the edges, but then it was kind of caving in on itself, and so trying to fill out the middle was taking forever. And it almost makes you wonder, like, would it have been faster to fill out the middle, to build from bottom up first, like just so that structurally it remained sound and you could put the pieces in faster, even though it would be a little more difficult to figure out which piece goes where.
You almost wonder if one of the other three people had been able to like solve it and get on that train, if they could have made up a ton of ground building it that way. Yes, absolutely. Because it did seem like it was taking so long, and it was almost like, it was like taking them, so they had to hold on to it and make sure it didn't fall. It was almost like a Jenga tower thing where it was like, oh, can I put this in here? And it was like,
Lindsay's looked about to crumble. Like I thought
I was wondering if that was going to happen to one of them.
Yeah.
Like the way Mike, because I think Jeff's kind of commentary was very like, oh man, it's tougher to do. I'm like, oh, is like Mike or someone going to lose this challenge because it collapses with like a piece left? Or it looked like that was possible.
Yeah. But Mike pulls it out, and he is told that he can bring one person, and Mike says, wait.
Want to give me another one? Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Nah. Not you, Mike. Maybe somebody else, not you.
Yeah, he was like, no. Come on. Yeah, I actually thought, and we'll get to it. I really thought in this moment that he was maybe sealing Jonathan's fate by taking him on this reward and leaving the others to, again, as we saw, some players were, I think, probably correctly perceptive that Jonathan was not someone to really worry about anymore. But in the moment, I was like, oh, I don't know. Is this going to like lead to Lindsay being able to kind of convince the other three to, keep her?
Right. Yeah. It gives Lindsay the opportunity to talk to the votes she needs. What came across like my mind in this moment is because Jeff is like, be careful because you're fueling your competition with pasta. So watch out. And in my head, I immediately went to like, what if somebody said, hold on, Jeff, instead of saying,
Want to give me another one?
They said, can I take nobody? Can I just have it for myself? I don't want to fuel
surprised
anyone.
nobody has done that. I'm surprised nobody has done that. Just go for that move. I know. I've always thought about that. That would be the worst on the loved ones visit. That's like the most villainous move in Survivor history. It's just like you've won the loved ones. Pick someone with you, and you're like, honestly, nah. Me and my dad, we're just gonna chill.
I want it to be special for him. So
we're gonna go.
I won.
That would be incredible. That's like that person is instantly going to the final three, right? Like that is they're not gonna win. But that is like
the opposite of the Johnny Fair play.
It's the reverse. That's genius right there.
Maybe the move is to go up to Jeff before the challenge and be like, hey, if I win this, can you just say Can you just not give me the option to take anybody? Can you just be like, oh, it's just a solo thing?
Yeah, make Jeff the bad guy. Oh man.
Yeah, and then Jeff will be like, and they asked me to not let you not let them take anybody. Oh, Jeff, what the hell? Blowing up my spot. So Mike wins. He takes Jonathan. Doesn't really seem like it goes anywhere here. The main thing here is that the question is, now that Mike has immunity, he also has an idol. Marianne has an idol. Mike promised Marianne that he would give him her idol, or give her his idol. And she's thinking this might happen, and she wants Lindsay to go to the final 3 with her. So if that's the case, and Mike gives or plays his idol for Marianne, then Marianne has the ability to then play her idol for Lindsay to send Jonathan out. And it seems like she's pretty seriously considering this, but similar to the previous episode where it seemed like it took some conversations with people like Mike to understand I can't go to the end with Omer. She's having a conversation with Romeo, and he's like, what are you doing? No, we can't keep Lindsay. She's too big of a threat. And ultimately, she changes her mind. She decides she's not going to do it, even though it would have been really fun.
I know. I was kind of still thought it was going to happen. You know, when Mike made a big thing, he went up there and he's like, made a big deal of it. He's like, I'm playing it on Marianne. I thought, oh, he's going to, because then Romeo did his thing. And I was like, oh, I bet you Marianne's going to be the third one. And then again, it was the right move. She made the right move. She's won going away. I mean, this was absolutely the right move. But yeah, it would have been fun to see. And at that time, I wasn't sure. I mean, she had the correct read. I mean, at that point, I was like, does Marianne need one more big move? I wasn't sure.
Yeah. And especially in my mindset of like playing Big Brother, like I think in Big Brother, she would have had to make this move because in Big Brother, she wouldn't have like 2 hours of Final Tribal,
right,
to convince them that she was a great player, right? And so you kind of have to do it with moves like that. I think make Mike look like an extra fool, make yourself look like the mastermind. And at that point, I do think she probably can even beat Lindsay. It probably is closer than with Mike. I think Lindsay performs a lot better at Final Tribal than Mike does. And so ultimately, I think it's the right call for Marianne here, especially knowing that she is going to crush the Final Tribal. But I was definitely feeling like I don't think it's like the worst move in the world if she does this either. I think you know, you could probably go either way.
Well, the only counter argument is it too flashy for her? Does she not get taken in, like, you know, because it feels like Romeo kind of did take her in a sort of like, you know, her game has not been as, like, it's been mine. It's been more under the radar or whatever. I wonder if she makes that flashy a move at 4 and Lindsay somehow wins, you know, the challenge. Is Marianne definitely in that? You know, I mean, again, I wouldn't have necessarily thought about this way when I was watching the episode, but now having seen the whole episode, it was so clearly the right move. But in the moment, it's like, oh man, it's hard to say. I mean, it may have been wrong. Like she might have totally gone home because she becomes too big a threat and it goes out at 4. And also she used that idol so brilliantly in the Final Tribal.
Yeah.
So she didn't waste it. She was able to do a different move with it, which wound up being very effective.
Yeah. In some ways, probably more effective because it was at exactly the moment she needed it. So Lindsay is out, and we're now at the final 4. And this is where I felt Marianne was most in danger, because basically if Mike or Jonathan win this final 4 immunity, there's very few scenarios where I see her not making fire. Why would they ever make Romeo make fire? So that's pretty dangerous for her. She needs to win, or maybe Romeo can win and maybe he will take her, even though I think that's a mistake for him. And we get to the challenge. It's the Samotion, as I called it the rolling ball challenge.
Yeah,
I think my name is probably better, but it's fine.
You know, it's fine. I mean, hey.
Whatever. I'm not mad about it. And man, they sucked at this.
Yeah, Mike was really having a tough one. I know. I love Jeff.
Yeah, they're dropping out left and right, and even Jeff. Jeff is really like no mercy here. Yeah. Mike is out immediately. You know, Marianne goes out, And Jeff is just like, guys,
This is not a difficult phase of this challenge. Lots of kids watching could do this.
He also had a great quote. I don't know this where he was being he was like, that sound of the ball hitting the wood beneath your feet will haunt you for the rest of your life. Do you remember that? It was like, holy crap. It was like, he's going hard.
yeah. Jeff had nothing for him. He was really, the kids at home could do this, and you guys are failing.
We missed that live reunion show segment where he could have gone to the kid in the crowd and been like, be honest, you could have gone longer than Mike on that balls challenge. Am I right? Am I right?
Kid watching at home, you just saw how easy it is to beat players on this game.
yeah, exactly.
So
yeah, he did the opposite thing. So often Jeff will do that's fatigue. That's how hard the game is. That's what it's like here on the final day, final challenge. But instead he was like, you guys suck. You guys should be, it's like totally different.
I did cut out the second half of that where because I think what happened is he says he says kids at home watching could do this, and then he's like, all right, that was a little mean, but lack of sleep and food and stuff.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
So Romeo pulls this one out, which is obviously massive for Romeo to a degree, but even more so for Marianne. And it's really just like they don't even really get very far here. I even think like when I was looking at it, because basically it happens, I think when they add to their fourth ball.
Yeah, it's like it looked like it was right after Jonathan had the fourth ball. Like he almost spent too much time thinking about the spacing and then was not really able to lock back in.
Well, that was the thing. I thought Romeo was about to lose because I felt like Romeo did not space that fourth ball out very well. Mm-hmm. Both of them were his third and his fourth ball were very close together. Mm. I was like, Romeo's about to lose. And then I watched Jonathan space it out correctly. Yeah. I was like, Jonathan's nailed it. But he was so focused on correctly spacing it that his mind blanked. I think he went to like the wrong side to go grab the ball. And then just like that, he was out. I think one way or another, one of them was about to lose that challenge because I don't think that Romeo would have been able to catch those two, or at least it would have been very close. So it was definitely a close one, but Romeo pulls it out. And now things are looking bleak for Mike and Jonathan.
Yeah, it seemed like it was definitely going to be the two of them. Though, as you said, that may have been a mistake from Romeo. Yeah. Mike goes to Romeo in what does seem to be a pretty clear move of self-interest, but it actually may have been right for Romeo to do that. Even though Mike was largely doing it for his own benefit, it was probably the right thing for Romeo to consider.
That's the thing, right? Where it's like, Mike goes to Romeo. He's like, I know, I'm the guy. Yeah. Obviously, you're not stupid. You're gonna put me in the fire making challenge. Yeah. I know I'm the biggest threat. And this is like, he's conceding the point. I'm usually of the opinion that like, there's no reason to not be like, I'm not a threat. You think I'm going to win maybe, but I'm not going to win. Do you know how many people I've pissed off? I'm a 0 vote finalist. Like, we just saw this work exceedingly well in Big Brother Canada. Like there's no reason to not make that play. But Mike is like, you know what? I'm not going to insult their intelligence. I'm going to cede the point. Obviously I am the big threat. The problem here is that he's not even the big threat. Like, Marianne is the big threat.
Fools Romeo into like, well, it's interesting. We can talk about this sort of even later afterwards, but like, I was thinking a lot after this episode about now, like the statistics of sort of who wins in this thing. And the first 3 out of the first 4, it was the fire making winner. Mm-hmm. And there was all this emphasis. But if you look at the last 3 of 4, have been the person that was taken, right? Because Erica was taken, Tommy was taken, and now Marianne. So it's weird. So like even in like season 38, 39, 40, all in those rounds, you would have thought, oh, Mike wants to go into fire. He wants to. He's doing this because he needs the hero moment because blah, 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 blah. Whereas now that's not even necessarily true anymore. We're starting to see that it's not such a bad thing to be taken. And you don't necessarily need that moment like it seemed like you did in the late part of, 38, 40. Tommy looked like the outlier, and now he's not.
Yeah, and honestly, I prefer that. Like, if you are making fire at 4, you've kind of done something wrong with your game. You know what I mean? Like, unless somebody came back from Extinction Island and really messed with things, like, you kind of didn't set yourself up right. If you're making fire, and if you get taken, I think you're a little more likely. I mean, obviously, every situation is different. Sometimes the person taken genuinely is the GOAT, but if you're not and you get taken, then that's massive for you. And that's what we saw with Erica, and that's what we saw with Marianne here for sure.
Yeah, it all depends on the jury's perception of who the threat is, right? Because if you take someone who the jury sees as a threat, it actually hurts your game and does make that. I mean, that's why when we talk about how bad of a move would it have been for Marianne to save Lindsay with the idol, well, that really all just depends how the jury perceived Lindsay. Did they see it as, if Lindsay makes it to the end, it's a slam dunk, then yes, Marianne would have looked very foolish to save her. But if it was a little more like 50-50, then maybe it helps Marianne. It all depends a lot on the jury's perception of players to whether or not a move like that looks good. Yeah.
I think that Romeo, as you've kind of mentioned, he should have put Mike and Marianne. I think really just, and again, like I haven't like paid close attention to the exit interviews. Maybe this question has been asked or it hasn't been asked. I'm still under the assumption that there's basically no way Jonathan wins this game. I just feel like the way that he was portrayed to us, I feel like we don't see it. But even on the island, there were people who were talking about Jonathan, like, we don't like the way that he is treating us. Like his arrogance, his condescension. I just feel like there's no way. It put him in a final tribal council. I just don't see it. And I think that Romeo saw that. I think he just thought Jonathan's the better bet to beat Mike, who can beat me.
Yes. And the big thing with Jonathan too, when you looked at it, was that it's like, he had not succeeded socially, like you're saying. I mean, as far as that, and people didn't have a ton of respect for him strategically. And when you really think about it, he wasn't on like an all-time immunity run either. You know what I mean? Like, that was the other thing about Jonathan, is at the beginning of the merge, there was this feeling of like, oh man, this guy, he might win every challenge. Like, he might, and he never really did. He never won out. Like, he lost 5 and 4. It's like he never won out. So it was sort of like he didn't really even have that. So he wasn't a huge threat at the end, really, at all, in the same way, because he didn't even have the physical component, which I think was the thing that people thought was going to happen, right? Oh, at some point his physical achievements may be undeniable. He might be. Yeah, it never really happened.
I think he, because in the first half of the season, I was getting a lot of questions that were like, is Jonathan the greatest competitor in Survivor history? And I kept saying, like, wait until the merge before you start saying that, because individual immunities are very different than tribal immunities. I think that there's an argument to make that Jonathan is the greatest tribe immunity performer, just because of how well he can carry an entire tribe. I think that like being really good at puzzles can also be super effective, but even then, like, there's no amount, and we talk about this in Big Brother all the time. The difference in physical ability is so much greater than the conceivable difference in puzzle ability. You can be really good at puzzles, and a person that's not very good at puzzles can still compete with you at puzzles. But if you're Jonathan and you are trying to push a boulder against somebody who is half your size, they are never going to beat you at pushing that boulder. Yeah. Like, so the sheer physicality that Jonathan has in those team challenges, I think, is definitely, there's a case to be made that he's super good at those. But even then, if there's a challenge that doesn't involve strength, like the blindfold one that they lost, it's still not going to do much for them. And certainly once we get to the immunity, the individual immunities, like he won like what, 2 of them?
And to his credit, he was close in a lot of them. Like, he obviously is still good at a lot of different things, but he certainly was not able to win them with the consistency that the greatest challenge performer of all time should be able to.
Exactly.
How many did he win? 2?
I think he won 2.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not. I mean,
feel
when
like
you
I
think about,
remember.
other people won a lot. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like I
5
remember
is the
him.
record, right?
I think it's either 5 or 6.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I
And
think it's 5. In one season, it's the record is 5. I think.
yeah, like, and a big part of it too is just like who you're competing against as
Yeah.
well. Like Kenzie says he did what he did. He won 2. Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is not great. Not great as an individual
Not
immunity
great.
performer.
Great.
Yeah. So I think Romeo should be taking Jonathan, make Marianne and Mike the 2 bigger jury threats, face off against each other. And then look, if Marianne loses to Mike, I think that's Romeo's best case scenario. I think Romeo performs decently at Final Tribal. If Mike also performs as poorly as he does in Tribal with Marianne there, at that point, I think Romeo might actually pick up some votes and might have a chance. I don't think it's impossible.
Well, that's what the edit can sometimes play with our perception, because the edit knows Romeo doesn't win.
Yeah.
So does sort of not portray him in a way that it feels possible. But then you think about in the real time, yeah, he could have gotten to the end with Mike and Jonathan. And if Jonathan, we're saying, has no chance, Mike, you're right, did not do very well at Final Tribal. Romeo did pretty well, maybe has actually more to say if he's also been able to get rid of Marianne. So there's a world where it may have been closer than it felt because of how the sort of show was edited after the fact.
Yeah. Especially if he can sort of articulate that he took Jonathan because he knew Jonathan was a GOAT, which is something that I don't think a lot of like people were able to recognize. Like, I think somebody like Lindsay on the jury would be like, he was a GOAT. Why was I trying to get him out? You're so smart, Romeo.
Well, I think what we're seeing in these games is self-awareness is so important to winning over the jury at the end. I think we even saw that with Xander too. They really, were giving him for not having the correct read, not understanding how dangerous Erica was. And I think there was some other stuff too that he was seen as having the wrong read on. And yeah, I think we've seen that in the last couple of seasons, and maybe it's always been this way, where if you go into the tribal and you say stuff that is, if you don't have a clear self-awareness of yourself, it's one of the worst things you can do in Final Tribal.
Yeah. So ultimately we see that it's going to be Mike versus Jonathan making fire. I feel like the way that they edit the fire making like prelude it's too you got to change it up, editors, because it's too easy to read. It's every time they're like they're showing Jonathan like making fire immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Mike is struggling. I'm like, okay, Mike won.
Yeah.
Like
it would have been incredible if this whole time Mike had been like, I'm not telling anyone if I'm good at fire, and the show had like made this mistake, and then he truly had been terrible. That would have been a crazy plus. Like, it's clear that he just cannot do it at all. That would have been pretty wild, but that was not the case.
Yes. So Mike wins the fire, and it's Mike, Romeo, and Marianne in the final 3. And yeah, I mean, let's we've been referring to it all podcast, but the final tribal performance, we do get a segment that I loved, which is hearing from the jury. We've seen this before on the show and in the Ponderosa videos as well in the past, but getting it back here, I think, was really great. Hearing from the jurors, even just like getting to see the jurors again, I think is a great way to sort of like tie us back in. Not just in the context of them questioning the final 3, but also just like in a confessional, hearing from them. That was great. They say to us they want to hear from Mike that it was intentional, that he was not playing with honor and integrity, that he was playing that up, and that he intentionally portrayed that character so that he could turn around and stab people in the back. Which is exactly what we've been saying also for a long time now, is going to be Mike's problem, that he's telling us he's playing with honor and integrity, that the only reason he's betraying his allies is because they betrayed him first, and how that's not going to play very well in the jury. And as soon as they said, I mean, I already thought that Marianne was going to win, but like this very much reaffirmed to me, like, yeah, this is he is not going to answer these questions correctly.
I had a similar feeling.
Yeah. And then like Romeo's as well was like, Romeo's maybe not as bad as people say he is, because like, hey, maybe sometimes being a cockroach is like a good thing. It's like, okay, that's the best you had for Romeo.
Yeah. It did feel like the jury was not as, it felt like those were the clips that it seemed like they were sort of just saying something because they had to. It did not feel like Romeo had it in the bag. And again, probably did better at Final Tribal than we were expecting. But yeah, he just, it's what do you do when you're a player like that? I wonder. I mean, it's hard. I mean, at what point, what could he have done? He did not have much agency in the game, and I don't know. Maybe he should have thrown himself into fire. I don't know. Like, what could he have done? Like, was it too late at that point? I don't know.
I mean, like I said, I think that the little bit of agency he had, right, was putting people into fire. I think he made the wrong choice with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what completely sinks him. If he makes the right choice, if he gets there with Jonathan and Mike, then I feel like he has a little bit more of a chance. Spin the fake idol thing into a story about how it really worked for him. He tried that, but like Marianne's was just so much better. If Marianne's not there, I think it works a little better. Talk about the how he was forced to use the connections that he did have to maneuver through the game, that he recognized Jonathan as a go, so on and so forth. I think, I don't know that there's like I think what I said when I was streaming watching the episode is that I feel like Romeo did about as well as he could at Final Tribal without lying or embellishing about his game. Yeah. He was very honest about his game, which is what Marianne did as well. The difference was that Marianne had more of a game to talk about, but I think that he was vulnerable, he was emotional, he opened up to the jury, and he sold the game that he actually played very passionately, and I think that was good. And up against easier to beat people, I think maybe he has a chance. The only thing he could have theoretically done better is effectively lie about his game.
But that can also be a sinking ship too. If people can counteract that, and you have to be very careful. Thing. Well, he said something though, right? And I can't remember if it was in the Final Tribal or if it was or in the reunion or in the Tribal or where it was. But he said something about he took Marianne because she had a similar game to him or something like that. I think it's like what you're saying, but it was a better version of his game with more moves, more agency. She was more well-spoken, even though he did a very good job. So that I think was the problem, is that he seemed to take her because, it's similar. And it's like, but if the person has a similar game that is also better and easier to sell, it just feels like that. I don't know what his thinking was there,
Yeah. So that's going to be it for Romeo. But there are, I think, two examples that I have from the Final Tribal that I think sort of help exemplify the poor performance of Mike and the good performance of Marianne. One is that obviously the big question for Mike is, did you play with honor and integrity? And let's talk also about Tori, who absolutely set Mike up. She laid out the trap. Mike, my perception of you is that you played with honor, integrity, and honesty. Is that a good read, essentially? And he was like, he fell right into it. He's like, absolutely. I played with honor and integrity. And
she did a funny thing where the way she talked about it, she said the perception of each of them, and they were all kind of negative, but then she didn't seem to end it with, that's not a good perception. You got to change that. She didn't give them that hint. She basically, like you're saying, she said these things. These are my perception of you. And all of them were, like she said, Marianne didn't take the game seriously. And she it was on them to sort of realize it was a negative and counteract it.
Well, that was kind of the trick, right? Because Mike's was something that was negative to the jury, but to him would sound positive. And so he had no idea that he needed to change it. Whereas Marianne's was a direct, this is how they perceive you. This is what you need. This is what you need to counteract if you want to get votes. And so Mike is in a position, he needs to say that it was a ploy. That's what they want him to say, because the reality is it wasn't. And the fact that it wasn't means that he wasn't playing enough of an active, intentional, self-aware game for them to respect it. And he doesn't see that. And so they talk about, did you play with honor and integrity? You betrayed so many people. I only lied to Roxroy. Excuse me?
Yeah.
And so where's the honor? And he says this.
I had to protect myself. That's my honor for myself also.
Honor for myself. That's That's what I played with honor to myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it was compared, on other podcasts. I mean, that is like a coach, that's coach level, right? Where you're sort of like, well, I still had honor. It was just honor to myself. It's like, what is happening, dude? Like,
yeah. Here, so obviously the idol reveal, all of that, the big moments, I think were all great. But I pulled a clip that I thought was just a pretty basic answer. It was I think this was in response to Omer's question about, again, perception that you didn't do anything, that you played poorly in the pre-merge. The jury kind of like going hard on Marianne, as opposed, like in contrast with Mike, who's kind of like, oh, but I played with honor for myself. And like, no, I totally did. This is how Marianne responds to a negative question.
Yep. And I can understand that. And thank you for pointing it out and giving me the chance to explain my social game.
Right.
Is simple, right? Like, yep, absolutely. Great point. Thank you so much for bringing it up so that I have a chance to address it. Immediately quelling the tension of having asked a negative question, which like everybody, like anybody that stands up there and asks a negative question is going to feel a little bit of like, I feel a little weird about this. Like, doesn't matter how mad they are, right? And so somebody just being like, you know what, thank you. I completely understand what you're saying. Like, gives them the clear to be like, okay, that was a good question. Thank you. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to address this, implies a confidence of I can address this. And then of course she goes on to explain it. And Marianne, what I think she also does well is that she's going to very much admit the holes in her game. Yeah, I did play poorly in the pre-merge. It taught me some things that I learned heading into the merge. And there were moments also where I struggled, like when I wanted to take Lindsay, and then I realized I shouldn't. And this is, I think, was very important for Marianne because we just talked about this with Romeo, right? The only way out potentially for Romeo was to maybe just try and lie about his game at that point. Right. But it's very difficult to lie about your game at Final Tribal. It's very difficult. People will catch on. People are very like skeptical of a braggadocious kind of attitude. But which is why it's important, I think, that Marianne was very honest about the holes in her game, because when she's admitting, yeah, I didn't play well in the pre-merge. I did consider taking Lindsay. I did think about taking, keeping Omer for too long. It makes it so much more believable when she tells you the good parts that you didn't know about. It makes it seem like she's not lying. She's not just coming up with random things. She's saying, yeah, I did poorly here. I did poorly here, but you don't know about this. This is what I did really well. I made this move and I was doing, when you thought I was being just like aloof and didn't know strategy, I was being strategic the whole time. I was thinking strategically, and here's the proof. I've got an idol, and really selling that she's not just spewing BS at them to make it seem like she played an impressive game, making it seem like, no, these are genuinely things that you didn't know about that were really impressive.
You really have to be your own. You have to be your own, like, worst or best critic. I don't know. In terms of, you really, before Final Tribal, I think Mike admitted he didn't do enough of this, where he kind of thought, I think I got it. Like, I think I'm good. I think I was either his exit interview with Rob or the one I read with Dalton Ross or whatever, whichever one. He maybe said it at both, because I listened to both, and it was like, it's like he was like, I think I had it, and I wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared for the criticisms. Whereas, like you're saying, Marianne was doing something very smart, which was, if there were criticisms, she wasn't trying to paper over them or seem unprepared. She had a counterpoint, or yes, I agree. Like you're saying, it's very important in Final Tribal to be concise, right? I think that's anytime I've watched the show with like Final Tribal goes bad, it's usually because a player is like, well, the thing is I was like this, and then also, and it becomes word salad, and it's sort of like, you're like, they have no idea. And sometimes people have done that and still like won the game, and like, it happens. But those are usually the moments when you feel them floundering. And I don't think Marianne almost had a single one of those. It was always concise and thought out, not fake, not prepared in a bad way, like prepared in a good way, where she knew, she was smart enough to sort of know what was probably coming and had kind of counterpoints.
Yeah, and I think I really started to talk about feeling like Mike couldn't win the game around the time that Omer tricked him into believing that Hai had said that he was tricking him, right? because what I was saying was, first of all, if he's there with Omer, then Omer can drop that in Final Tribal and makes him look like a fool. If he's not there with Omer, that means that Omer has been in the jury and has been able to drop that. And it really makes Mike look like he wasn't aware of the game, that he was led along by other players. And I think it goes a long way that he was a driving force to take Omer out. But it still is a huge harm to his game when he's listing my best move was taking out high. And they're like, dude, you don't even know that Omer tricked you into doing that. And he's like, that lack of knowledge and awareness of that is devastating to his game. And so I think that, first of all, I think it would have played better if he said my best move was taking out Omer, because that directly, helps take away Marianne's credit for making that move, which Jonathan tried to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say he did try to do that, and it's like, that was one of the only moments where it seemed like Marianne, and again, who knows, we didn't see all of it, but like Marianne seemed so much like the sort of person who was spearheading it, and the other guys didn't really want to do it, and that's what it seemed like to us, and it seemed like, it wasn't a bad thing for her, but that was one of the only moments, right, where it seemed like, something she said was sort of contradicted or something, or she was caught in something. It was one of the only times, like I said.
That was the only moment where because I always try to, like, when you watch these shows, you tend to know the truth. Like, I know that Marianne was more of the spearhead on that move because they didn't want to do it after Lindsay won immunity. But I always try to think about, like, if I didn't know that, what would I think if I was trying to read this person? That was a moment when she was like, well, I may have not wanted to take him out at 6 originally, but I was going to take him out at 5. And then, so I would have been like, I don't believe you. I don't believe you on this. But luckily Jonathan is like really condescending. So I still would have been on Marianne's side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And again, people, whether fair or not, people were not giving him strategic credit for anything really. So he was not going to be like, wait, let me tell you what was really going on in the strategic game. I don't think anyone was like, oh, what was it? You knew, people were not really that receptive to that.
And I think Mike missed an opportunity here to jump on this and be like, yeah, Omer was my move. I convinced Marianne to make that play. And if not for me convincing Marianne, Omer stays in the game, maybe wins the whole thing. And so, and that directly takes away from one of her bigger moves. And, maybe she tricked me into giving up my idol afterward, but it didn't matter. I had immunity. I wouldn't have given it to her if I hadn't won immunity. And it's not like she did anything with it. And I made the move to take out Omer. He needed to directly take away credit from what she was saying. And he wasn't able to do that. I don't think he necessarily would have been able to do it either. I think she would have been able to out-talk him, but it was a missed opportunity, I think.
Yeah, he just didn't seem like, we're going back to, I think that that's kind of what you're hitting on here. It's like he just didn't seem prepared for this version of the game to matter. Like he really seemed to think like he was sort of playing. And again, this is like, I mean, this is almost like, like you can apply this to any sports metaphor, right? If you have a big lead and you lay back and kind of stop pushing, and you think, well, it's okay. I think he felt like he just had to run out the clock. And sometimes when you're in that mode of trying to run out the clock, you open it up for, someone to pass you. And I think in this case, it was even closer than he thought it was.
It was like he was at the end of the race. And he was like, I did it. I'm in the lead. There's the finish line. He's just kind of in cruise control.
She's like right behind him.
And she's been drafting off of him for the last mile, and he hasn't seen her back there. And so she rounds the corner and sprints right by him. He's like, wait, what? Hey, what?
Yeah, and that's such a tough mind switch to do. And again, it's all the self-awareness that Marianne had, which is she knew, and maybe who knows? I know people said they were leaning toward Mike. Maybe that is true, maybe not. We don't know how far she had to come from behind. Maybe she would have still gotten some of those votes, but she went into Tribal, I think, feeling like she needed to do something there. She needed to have points and gain ground and win that portion of the game. And I think when you're Mike and you almost feel like you have a perfect game, and you're like, oh, well, I think he probably thought, oh, the less I say, the better. I'll just be myself, and I can only screw up my chances now because I have such a great chance to win. Once he realized that was not the case, I think he was just like totally on it. Probably wouldn't have been able to out-talk Marianne anyway. Almost certainly wouldn't have been able to, but he didn't even he didn't even prepare himself. Like he didn't even have a chance with how he came into it.
We've learned this lesson many times in the past, and Mike really should have, considering he's been watching for
21 years.
Oh yeah, that was hilarious.
1 years.
Oh yeah,
but
I forgot about that.
But basically, like, because sometimes Mike does make it to the finals and he does just win, right? Like sometimes he doesn't need to do that. But the safe play always for me, because you don't always know what the jury's thinking. Maybe you're bad at reading them. Maybe you just have no idea. The safer play, like just never. It doesn't. I don't care if it's in your head. Your own narrative is, well, Hai betrayed me, so I had to betray him, and then Omer betrayed me, so I had to betray him. I don't care if that's what you actually think happened. Never, ever portray it that way to the jury, because either they will take like, yes, I did betray you, Mike, you're totally right, which is best case scenario. And even then, you're still putting the agency of the game in their hands. If they hadn't betrayed you, you wouldn't have taken them out. And then do they beat you at that point? That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is they're like, no, you idiot, I wasn't going to betray you, or whatever, right? And you look really bad. Always just default, safe play. Look, I did what I had to do to make it here, because they can't argue with results. At the end of the day, they're like, Mike, did you play with honor? And you really played up that you played with honor and integrity, but you betrayed all of these people. What is real? Look, at the end of the day, I did what I had to do to get here. And I'm sorry that I had to turn on you guys. It might not be everything they're looking for. It's not like the best answer in the world, but it really helps stop you from going into the negative territory. It's at least neutral enough for them to be like, all right, it's not really what I want to hear, but like, how can I argue? He is sitting there. And it kind of plays to their ego a little, like, and if I hadn't done it, I think you would have beat me. That's
like the oldest,
which is always the great one. Yeah.
Trick in the Survivor Tribal Council thing is I had to, you were my biggest threat. And also I think he kind of said something like this towards the end where he's like, I guess maybe I didn't play as loyal, but he said it in such a weak way in terms of the way he said it. He didn't say it as like, because when he started saying that, I'm like, okay, well, he's not doubling down. He's sort of, but like he needed to frame that in a way of like, you know what? You're right. You know what? You guys are right. And almost like Marianne. And thank you for bringing that to my attention, because now I can tell you all that I didn't, and I still played the best game. He just didn't have what it takes to pivot off and stay with the pedal to the metal, or the balls to the wall. He didn't have that in him,
Yeah.
To keep fighting for his game.
You could tell that he recognized his error, right? Yeah. Like he's really screwed up. And then about halfway through, at least the edited portion of this, we see a shift in him where he's like, as you said, like, yeah, thinking about it, maybe I didn't play with honor and integrity. But at that point, it was too late. He's already exposed the fact that he was not self-aware of the game that he was playing. And that's where he's lost them. And, at that point, he needs to make a hard pivot, as you said, to something else. And it just, he was a little too slow to catch on. I mean, a credit to him for catching on in the first place. So there are lots of people who get to the end, never catch on to how poorly they're doing, fully continue to be in defense mode. And he's able to get out of that, but it's just not enough. Especially when you have Marianne sitting there just crushing it question after question. So, that's it for Mike. He only gets one vote.
Yeah, which I think was Jonathan's, right? I think I saw that.
I think so.
Yeah. And look, and like what you're saying, it is a credit to Mike in that Mike was a good player. He was really good. He wasn't one of these guys. We saw this, the way he was empathetic and wanting to learn about different perspectives. He was a great player. And we see that in Tribal. He wasn't this arrogant guy that was like, yeah, you know what, man, screw you. It's just, he just did not have what it takes to beat Marianne at the end there. So we saw that he wasn't a disaster, and he didn't reveal himself to be like an unintelligent, arrogant guy, but it just, he did some good things, but nothing that was going to get him the win over Marianne.
Yeah. So that's the finale. We had the reunion segment. Reading the votes live. I know some people don't like this. I kind of like it personally. I know that a lot of people are like, oh man, like they have to then like sit through all of the stuff and they're sad and stuff. But that's kind of the norm in these shows. Like, Survivor
they're
is kind of
always
not
sad
in the
at the
norm.
reunion. They're always sad at the reunion anyway. You know what I mean? Though I will say, thinking about this time, I did feel as if I liked them reading the votes in person, but I didn't enjoy the in-person reunion as much this time. And I was thinking about it. I think I've never thought about it like this because it's never not been this way in the time I've been watching. But I guess other than that first season, but I think what's fun about, because I think, was it Jeff or somebody was like, oh, what's great is that they're unfiltered, they're raw, they haven't seen the show. But I think sometimes it's interesting to see what they say when they've seen the show, because it's different than what we've been getting for the whole season. Where I think watching it this time, I didn't feel like there was much more for people to offer. It's fun for the show to sort of catch up to our perception. We're watching this edited thing in real time. I always find it so satisfying. It always feels like a nice completion of the journey for me when the show catches up to my experience, where now I'm watching something that they look different, they've aged, I like hearing the different perspectives. I think is fun, more so than, not that there's no merit to this, but that's what I felt this time. I was like, what's fun about the live reunion when Jeff doesn't spend it doing random shit stuff in the crowd? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
No, I agree. So I liked reading the votes live, and I think the part of the reunion that I was actually invested in and cared about was the immediate bit where he's asking the jury, why did you vote the way you did?
Right,
what would you have done if this had happened? How were you feeling this way? What were you doing? How did you feel coming in? Which way were you leaning? That was all super interesting, and it's the most valuable information is happening right after the vote. They haven't had any chance to talk with anybody or see anything. So like we're getting great information there. I love that bit. Keep that bit in, and then send them home, and then bring them back for a live show for the rest of it. Especially because Jeff says, as you mentioned, he says, here for the raw emotions, unfiltered, and then. His questions are, so how'd you feel about the do or die twists? Right?
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah, one of his favorite new
right?
twists, he said. I don't know if everyone caught that. That was, that was one of the moments.
Survivor's pretty hard, isn't it? Hey? Yeah. No rice? Come on.
Exactly.
Show of hands. How many people cried? What? All of you? No way. It's just like, what does this have? This has nothing to do with the individuals that just played this game. You have all of these raw, emotive people, and you're asking them generic questions about Survivor. And even the questions that are more personal, he comes back to Mike, who's clearly like, oh man, I just lost this game. And he comes back to Mike and he asks Mike a question that's like, so you just heard the jury, they were leaning toward you. And then they voted Marianne. And it's like, okay, this is like, are we going to get something from Mike? And he's like, are you good with that? What is Mike supposed to say to that question other than, yeah, I'm good with it. I'm good with it, Jeff. At the end of the day, Marianne got the votes and a nothing answer. You are asking a question that can only have a nothing answer. There's so many examples of that.
Yeah, and I like the way these casts have been a little bit more seeing it as a game, and it's more fun, and they're very complimentary of each other. That kind of cast is not really conducive to what they're trying to get here. I mean, look, if they'd done a reunion like this at Samoa, minutes after Russell, like that could have been wild, like if he's sitting there and he knows he lost and he's just like, really like can't handle it, and he's sort of almost challenging the other juror. I don't know if I would even want to watch this, but I think this is more what you'd get, where there would be stuff to talk about afterwards, where you go, oh man, they really hashed out stuff in person, different people. Someone said, like, you'd want them to be like, but that's not necessarily what the show wants to be, and that's not necessarily how people have been playing, but you almost want someone like in the mic position to be like, okay, sorry, Jeff, excuse me. Why didn't you vote for me? What was it good? You want that. That's the raw, stuff that would give us more information.
Right. I feel like the better question is either focusing on Mike, like you just heard the jury was leaning toward voting for you. They didn't. Like, what are you feeling right now? Focus on him. Don't mention Marianne, because if you mention Marianne, he's got to be polite to Marianne, and rightfully so. But if you focus at like, you just screwed up. Like, how do you feel about this? Like now he's being a little more vulnerable about his own feelings of like, I feel like I just messed it up, Jeff. Like I just screwed up. Or if you want to be messy, you can be like, Mike, you just heard that there were people leaning toward voting for you. Are there any votes that you were really surprised you didn't get?
Yeah.
Right. And then you might get something a little messier. But
yeah,
either way, I just feel like the rest of that reunion, you're right. Like it didn't really work. And we didn't even get the, like, this is what they look like now. How has your life been since it's been airing? Anything from the show that stood out to you? How is your interactions with the fans? All of that stuff that we miss out on. So I feel like there are some positives, but I also feel like there are some negatives that they should try to hopefully iron out. But
I mean, this was
I
a
also
totally different thing because this season was during. I mean, it's like once things are safer for them to do this, it's more like this. They should not have done it this time. But I think it seems like they're almost trending in that direction of all these changes we made, because of the way the world was. We might just keep them all. And it's like, well, no, there's still some stuff that you can go back to, when it's right time.
My favorite question that Jeff asked was this one.
And would you have been okay if you had died?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, Jeff.
No.
I don't know that I would have been okay if I had died. I don't know that I'd be feeling anything, to be honest.
Oh, no. I know. Well, that's how dangerous Survivor is now. Yeah, I think that twist is here to stay for sure, unfortunately. The way Jeff was talking, it feels like do or die could be. I don't know. Is there any way? Is there a placement that it could be better if it's earlier? I just don't know. Like, if there's... I just don't know.
I feel like there are ways to make that one work. I feel like the problem, because like a lot of the twists that people don't like, they're often like unfair, like the hourglass twist. They'll be like, it's dumb, it's unfair. But the do or die one to me is purely a production level mistake, where it's just like, it's not interesting to watch somebody lose a 33% chance to stay pick and then get sent home with no vote. Like that's not what people are here for. People are here for the vote outs. And if somebody just like, if Lindsay had picked the wrong one and we didn't get that like excellent tribal, that's lame. That's a lame result.
I think the component of it that's interesting, which maybe they could keep, is the idea that if you sit out, you cannot win immunity, but you're somehow safe or not. You know what I mean? It's like a weird, like, or maybe it's not immunity. It has to be a power, because obviously you get immunity anyway if you sit out. But that's the thing that I find interesting, right? Which is, and I don't know how you transition that, but this idea of making a decision where you go, I'm losing agency in the game. I'm losing that in favor of being safe. I think that decision is interesting, right? But I don't know how you know.
I think with lower stakes, maybe like, the do or die twist is if you pick right, you get double votes. If you pick wrong, you lose your vote. Or something like that, where it produces the same amount of uncertainty at tribal, where it's like, well, we have this plan if she has 2 votes, and we have this plan if she has no votes, or whatever, but without the potential result of just like, oh, she's out. All right, pack it up, everyone. That one was easy.
Well, so I'm saying maybe there is something like you're saying where there's one cycle where you can sit out of the challenge. You're safe, but you have no vote, or something, or you can be safe. And so you get one cycle where it's crazy and it's this big twist, and now you have all these people who are safe, but now they have no ability to sort of change the outcome. And so you have to kind of make that decision where it's like, well, because I think that's the kind of decision where some people would be like, okay, I'm out. And others would be like, well, I can't give up my vote, because if I give up my vote and these other 3 people, then like we could, it would be really interesting to see how that went. And then some person could be like, why did you sit out? We needed your vote. Like, and they'd be like, well, I'm safe now. And I'd be like, well, if I survive this round, I'm pissed. It's like, there's stuff there. I think you're right. It's this mechanic of that someone can just go home by chance is not exciting.
Yeah.
It doesn't make for a satisfying end to an episode.
All right. Well, are we ready to rate these final 5 players?
Let's do it.
Do we have the beef?
I'm hoping somebody comes with some beef.
Did you bring the beef?
Oh my goodness. I thought you were supposed to bring it. Oh my gosh. I'm like Mike at Tribal. I don't know. I don't have the comeback. I don't have it.
I mean, at least you brought the pasta, right?
Yeah. Or the garlic bread. I mean, I love the way Mike says it like he's never heard of it before. He's like, what? Like, you listen, it's like he's like, garlic bread?
So what you're saying is that you forgot about it.
You've also earned pasta.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, go.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. That was great.
All right, let's rate the players. We're going to rate them as we talked about at the start of the podcast from 1 to 10 based on how well they did. Primarily in this episode, obviously knowing the result, we're going to factor in the results a bit as well. But also just based on their performance in the episode. So we'll start with Lindsay, who was the first person voted out here. It's an interesting position to rate Lindsay because obviously she's out in 5th, which is the worst placement of the rest of this cast. But in some ways, she was the second most likely to win of everyone here. And I think you have to consider the fact that like she does get that advantage. She does come very close to immunity, very nearly did win. Part of the reason why she got the advantage is because she had Marianne on her side, which is kind of absurd. And a credit to, I think, Lindsay's social game. And just loses Marianne just at the end. I think ultimately Lindsay's mistake is that she like many others underestimated Marianne, didn't think that Marianne's plan would succeed, and therefore didn't really put work into convincing Marianne to keep her around. Because she thought it all came down to Mike. But it was Marianne that she needed to be focused on, and I think she wasn't focused on Marianne, and I think that's kind of what sinks her. But ultimately, I think you do have to credit her for being that close in the first place, both to staying in that round and then potentially winning the game. So it's kind of a tricky position here. How are you feeling, Brendan?
Yeah, I think even just hearing you talk it out, it does feel pretty middle of the road. I think it is like trying to think. I honestly think I'm going to go a little lower than I think I would just go with a 5 for this episode because, everything she did right, it seems she did something wrong to counteract that. She gets the advantage, but then can't seal the deal. She has Marianne on her side, but then is unable to keep it going. And so I just think like at this point for this episode, I feel good about giving her a 5. That's probably, as you were talking, I'm like, I think I'm going a little higher than I thought just because it was all there, right? And I think there's a lot of different, even maybe just she picks a different station to do in a different order in that challenge. Like maybe she just wins. Like there's probably other days where she just is able to win. And again, we I don't know if this is any of the exit interviews or something. Like we don't know how close she was to like, was it that if she gets there,
exactly,
it's over? Against anyone who isn't a Marianne, it probably would have been. But against Marianne, that's the thing. Did she put herself in a position where she would have beaten anybody else? It's hard to know. So I think for me, it's 5. It's middle of the road. She did a lot of things right, and then I don't know. There was just a lot of things that just didn't go right.
Yeah, that's exactly where I am as well. I was thinking about potentially a 6, but that is, for me, I would have given her a 6 if I felt like she was in the spot where like, if only she had made it to the end, she definitely wins. Yeah. I don't know that. And the fact that I don't know that means that I can't go that high considering she did come short and we don't even know. And on top of that, I don't know that she would have tried to get Marianne out at 4. Like again, like it's hard to believe she would not take Romeo to the end if she won Final Four immunity, but I don't know, and she still wanted Jonathan out. And at that point, Jonathan, she should have wanted Marianne out.
Yeah, and
Jonathan.
Marianne, who is a great player, would have played 4 differently. We don't know. Would Marianne have put in the work to be taken by Lindsay? Would she have? We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know.
So yeah, I'm also at a 5 for Lindsay, which means that we have to talk about Jonathan in 4th place. And yeah, it's like, again, I still don't have confidence. And please tell me in the chat if somewhere it has been confirmed that Jonathan definitely doesn't win in the end. That is my assumption, but I do not have the evidence to back it up. So I don't think that I could go like all the way down to a 1 necessarily. I also don't think that he necessarily like plays oh no, he does play pretty bad, doesn't he?
It's a pretty bad episode.
It's like I'm still kind of confused about what happened with the fire making thing, where Mike is trying to tell Jonathan, if he gives you an out, you take it. You don't make fire. You take your spot. And Jonathan's like, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to get in my head. It's not gonna work. What does that mean, Jonathan?
Maybe
does that mean you think that what he's trying to do is be like, hey, I don't want you to be in fire because I want to get there. You feel like you lose to Mike. You need to take him out in order to win the game. And so therefore you want to be in fire. And you think he's trying to trick you into getting himself an easier person to be. I mean, I think that is what he's trying to do.
I think that's what Jonathan thinks, right?
I think Jonathan thinks it's what's happening. But again, it's all based on a misread. Like, Jonathan should want nothing to do with fire. Jonathan should want to be in the final 3 and take his maybe second place money.
Yeah, and they stopped working together, right? Like if Jonathan and Mike had better reads on the game, they could have said, okay, Marianne is a huge threat. We have a shot against Romeo. We have to work Romeo. We have to find a way. I mean, they just were not playing the game at this level and didn't have the reads. But yeah, that would have been the move, right? If the two of them would have gotten together and gone, we need it. Look, one of us is going into fire, and that's fine. But whoever it is has to be against Marianne. We have a chance. Or they could have tried to do some crazy move where they, as I said, gaslight Romeo into thinking he needs to give up the necklace. I mean, this is all getting into fan fiction, but this is the kind of stuff they needed to be thinking about. Not just, well, I guess it's me and you, me versus you. It's like, they had no idea that they weren't even making moves. There were moves they could have made.
Yeah. So, and the thing is that he doesn't even win a challenge like in this episode.
He loses fire, which I assumed he was going to win.
Loses final 4, loses final 5.
It's pretty rough. He doesn't fight, and he also doesn't fight. He doesn't convince Mike to play the idol on him. Now, he didn't need it, but it would have been nice if he would have got it, and he didn't seem to do anything to get the idol at 5 from Mike.
He tells Mike, like, if she plays one, please play it for me. Mike could have Jonathan could have very easily left there, especially at the beginning of the episode. Like, why didn't you play that idol?
That's what we're talking about. Yeah,
you literally just saw what happens when you don't do it, when it's not necessary in your head. Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna give him the 1. I just feel like he is socially played so poorly. I'm seeing in the chat that basically, as Gaia says, in a Mike, Jonathan, Romeo final 3, Chanel says Romeo would have gotten second place. That Jonathan would have been a 0. Yeah, Mike. Yeah. That was where they were leaning, but obviously, jury performance could have changed that theoretically. Yeah.
Romeo was not quite as good as Marianne, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, I just don't see Jonathan getting anything. Like, I just don't see it. Yeah. And he did nothing in these episodes to turn that perception around in my eyes. So he's drawing more dead than Romeo in my eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'd be tempted. Maybe I'll give him a 2 just to say, I feel like in this episode, he played very badly, but more passively than actively. So maybe that's worth something. I don't know. It's more about the things he did not do than the things that he.
Yeah, like he didn't lose the game in this episode.
Or he also didn't do things, but he did so many things wrong before. So maybe I'll give him a 2 just because I feel like maybe a 1 is like that you like actively you're like, I got this move, check it out. Like, and it was, you blew everything up, but it's pretty low. It's pretty darn low.
All right. So then we have Romeo, who came in 3rd place here.
That's hard.
Romeo is a difficult one because, on one hand, he wins that immunity. which is great. But I do feel like he does the wrong thing with it. But then he has a pretty decent final tribal performance. It's weird because I'm feeling like I have to be like, if he was in a spot where I felt like there was no chance he could win, I feel like I might feel more lenient about his mistake at the final four, because I'd be like, well, it didn't really matter. He couldn't win anyway. But I feel like he did have a chance to win. If he had gotten Marianne out, he might have been able to win, which makes me feel like it's a worse decision at 4, which is kind of weird because it means I'm punishing him more because he was in a better position. You know what I mean? Like, because he was closer to winning than I thought he was, I'm more critical of the move that stopped him from winning than I would have been if he had been nowhere near the win. So it's like, on one hand, I have to make sure I'm giving him credit that he was actually potentially that close. But then also it meant that decision did matter a lot more, and I have to be a little more critical of the move that potentially costs him the win. So it's a tricky place to be for Romeo.
Well, that's sort of the perspective I've gotten through this conversation with you is we were talking about, oh, he had more of a path. Now, like what we were just saying, what was in the chat is like, it sounds like Mike would have still maybe won. Romeo.
I think that's what I think that's where they would have been leaning, right?
Yeah, but I think it's a totally different perception if he's able to take out Marianne and own it. That's a very, very different thing. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying, where I kind of came into the thinking about this podcast like, oh yeah, well, what could Romeo have done? You know, he was drawing dead, you know, he was, and we go, well, no, he wasn't. He had kind of like we're talking the opposite of Jonathan, where he had it. He made an active move that was not so good for his game. So, and for me now, just as I feel like I would have to give him a little bit lower than Lindsay almost, because he, not much lower, but yeah, for me, I'm almost leaning to a 4 for this episode, because he didn't have much of a shot to begin with. Then he put himself in a position where you thought, oh man, he might have a shot here. And also, you know, we haven't really brought it up, but like everything he did with the fake idol was not good, right? Like everything like that wound up being a real mistake. And the way to make the demonstration a tribal, it had exactly the opposite effect. I think bringing it up around the campfire was fine. I actually think it was smart. His thinking of, let me tell everyone I have an idol so that stray votes don't go on me, I don't think was a bad thing at all. Of course, remember, people don't know Marianne has an extra idol, so it's easy to assume that there could have been another one floating. Marianne, I guess, would know. But the whole way he did it at, the final 5, where he's like, oh, Jeff, especially doing it after someone plays a real idol, that's like, it's almost like he fooled himself. Like, we've seen people go up to Jeff and give a fake idol and everyone laughs, the Rick Devens era and all that stuff. He almost did it to himself.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
And like, the thing is, I appreciate the attempt, right? Like, he's doing anything he can to alter the perception of himself in the eyes of the jury. But I don't think he's able to read that it doesn't seem like the right way to go about it. I don't think anybody sitting in the jury is feeling like, oh, they're about to vote out Romeo.
Yeah, right.
And he just played a fake idol. He tricked them into not voting for him. I don't think anybody's feeling that way. And obviously that's kind of like the story he's going to try to play. And again, I get the attempt, and I appreciate the attempt, because he's doing anything he can to change that perception. But I don't think that was the way to do it. I feel like, I feel like perhaps the way to do it was what Marianne did, which is like, hey, I had this fake idol the whole time that I used to make sure that even that I wasn't a stray person or whatever whatever it was. And, it sounds like they also questioned him about like all season long he was casting rogue votes. We kind of been wondering where those votes came from, trying to, do whatever. I think he needed to get out in front of that first before High brought it up, and sell it in a way that makes, again, I think he has to embellish a little bit. I think he has to lie a little bit and say like, this was a strategic move and it helped me in these ways. And then when Romeo kind of questions him on it, or sorry, when High questions him on it, it doesn't. Granted, I think High was a little like. I was like, you were gaslighting me. I asked you if you did it and you said no. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that's exactly what that
I
means.
don't know. Yeah.
I think I think he's just lying to you. I think he's
It's
just
a lie,
lying
yeah.
about what he did. He's not trying to convince you that you cast a vote against yourself. I think that would be gaslighting.
Yeah, it's almost like that whole thing of like, it seems like when it comes to the final tribal, it was like too hot, too cold, just right. You know, Romeo needed a little more confidence. He needed to be a little more sure of himself. He needed to believe he had more of a chance and really go for it. Mike needed to believe he had less of a chance so he could sort of come in. And Marianne was right there in that perfect zone where she had the confidence and she had the understanding of her flaws. You know, they needed a little bit of each other almost.
Yeah, and I have a lot of respect for Romeo. I feel like I can empathize with what it must have felt like to come in, be playing pretty decently in the pre-merge, and then it just all crumbles, it all falls apart, and he just spends the entire rest of the game playing a game that he wanted to play, and he's just playing at the bottom. There's nothing he can do to get out of it, and it's just like really rough. Like I totally can like empathize with that position, but and at the end of the day, I just feel like it just wasn't there. I feel like it almost wasn't ever going to be there. So I went with a 3 for Romeo. Overall.
Oh wow, you're even lower than I was.
Even lower, yeah. I just feel like I feel like a huge mistake to take Marianne, the idol play, and again, like the tribal performance was pretty good, but it just wasn't enough. And he ultimately gets no votes, which is kind of what we expected. So there we go. All right.
Same spacing though between him and Jonathan, between the two of us, which I think is right. I think him being 2 notches above, wherever you have Jonathan, him being a couple notches above, that makes sense.
Yes.
You know?
All right. Second place was Mike. One vote finalist. How do we feel about Mike? It's a very interesting one. And for myself, like I'm tempted to almost go lower on Mike than Lindsay because I feel like he made more active mistakes in this episode that cost him the win. But it's again like he did come closer to the win, and I think you have to credit him for that. So it's a tricky thing, you know. Coming in, I think that in this episode, Mike had more of a chance to win than I anticipated. I really felt like, I mean, granted, he lost. You know, he only got 1 vote. And a lot of that came down to what we were talking about with his tribal performance that we expected that he would have. But I think when so much of the jury says I was leaning toward Mike coming in, and I also don't know exactly like how many of them really meant, like Omar was doing this. Like, what does that mean, Omar? Were you or were you not leaning toward Mike? But they were leaning toward Mike, or so it seems, and it seems like just a slight tweak to his final tribal performance, and he wins this whole thing. It's pretty good, but at the same time, like he puts himself in fire, basically. He actively, you know, thinks that Jonathan, it seems like he thinks Jonathan is his biggest competition. He vastly underestimates Marianne, even though Marianne stole his move out from under him. He isn't even able to recognize that. I don't think that's very good. He performs poorly in Final Tribal. You know, I just think there are a lot of bad things. I think that there are impressive aspects to Mike's game, and I think his prior ratings are proof of that. You know, he's gotten, I think, as high as an 8 from me in the past. I think he has done some great things in the past. This episode, though, I think was pure downside. Like he didn't survive any votes without immunity, and you know, like he only got 1 vote from Jonathan. So yeah, I'm pretty low. I'm pretty low on Mike's performance.
Yeah, I think, as you're talking, you know, it's that thing where he would be a much better remembered player if he'd lost fire, because there might have been, you know, it's that thing where you're like, man, if he hadn't lost fire, you know, oh man,
who knows?
He probably wins, you know, and we don't have that same, and maybe other jurors think he would have won because they have this idea in their mind that he would have been great at Final Tribal and been likable like he was in the game, and charismatic and whatever. Yeah, I still feel like I want to give him a little bit more than Lindsay. I still feel like he was in a spot. I think, you know, he made a lot of mistakes. I can't really argue with any of the things that you said, but it still feels like he could have had a shot. And I think if he was with he underestimated Marianne, which is tough, but I still feel like he had a shot here. He wasn't, again, the final tribal was, he just really didn't prepare properly, which is a fault, but he was close, and he could have just wound up there with Romeo and Jonathan. He was right there. It could have happened. If Jonathan had won immunity and put him in the fire against Marianne, he could have won. And Jonathan was close, like you're saying, to win. So I still think he almost had more scenarios, because we tend to believe that he would have definitely won if we're going to believe that he would have won against Romeo and Jonathan, which I think is still likely.
He has the edge for sure.
I'm going to give him a 6. To me, I still want to give him a little bit more than Lindsay. I think he was still the second best player of the episode. I think that's fair to say. I still think Lindsay made more active mistakes in terms of, she could have kept Marianne. She could have won the challenge. Mike even wins the challenge. He doesn't do much good with the power, but I'm willing to give him just a little bit more. He kind of does wrong because he plays it on Marianne. So that is a fair thing.
This to me, though, because I think that's another thing that I really didn't like about Mike in this episode, is that he wins immunity, and it provides him an opportunity to make another mistake, which is playing that idol on Marianne. Which, if he doesn't play that idol on Marianne, she has to play an idol on herself, probably there. She's probably playing that idol for herself, which means she's not going to have that bomb to drop at Final Tribal. Huge error that he plays it on her there. Another way for him to look like a fool. And then on top of that, he's doing this thing, which I think is an example of the poor social game in regards to jury management that he had on the island, which is that he makes people feel really burned by him. He's doing this thing with Lindsay prior to immunity, where he's like, I really want you to stay, go out there and win it. Really making it seem like, due to their personal connection, he really wants her to stay there. She's crying to him, I don't want to go out this way. He's like, of course, I would never want you to go out this way. And then afterwards, she is begging him, crying, I don't want to go out this way. Please, Mike, use your idol on me. And he not only doesn't use his idol on her, but instead uses it on Marianne, who he knows doesn't need it. You're gonna feel really burned by that. Why are you doing all of this? It's so much. So for me, I'm lower on Mike. I gave him a 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, the one thing before we move on quickly is, with Mike, if you were rating him differently, is Mike a player that does win a lot of other seasons, or is he always finding a way to lose at the end? That's an interesting thing to think about Mike. It seems like he's the kind of guy where he is probably getting pretty far in most seasons.
I think so.
Like he's going to make it. But is he fatally flawed?
I think he might be.
But yeah, that's what I'm starting to think too, even though,
because I think it's the combination of, he's a little bit gullible. He's kind of easily swayed by other people, and he comes into the game with the narrative in his head of, I play with honor and integrity, but he also wants to play the game. And so that combination, I think, very often leads to him being tricked into betraying people, thinking that those people betrayed him, going to Final Tribal saying, I played with honor and integrity. And I think that is the fatal mixture that will often cause him to lose the game. And even then, let's say that Omer doesn't get exposed. He plans to go to the end. He happened to get to the end with some people that he might have been able to beat. But even then, he's not able to recognize who the real threats are until he's sort of convinced by other people. Omer's the one person that he sort of caught on to, but I think from exit interviews, we kind of have heard that it was really Jonathan that caught on to Omer and convinced Mike. So I do think he might be a fatally flawed player. I think he's the kind of player, comes back, learns from his mistakes. I think he could do well. But if this is how he's kind of coming on to into the game every time, I think he's going to have some trouble winning in a Final Tribal.
Yeah, first time Mike seems like it's going to always end around this way. He's sort of doomed to either take someone out of loyalty and honor who, a scenario where Jonathan can win a jury vote.
Exactly.
He might take a person like that, and then he's sort of doomed to underestimate a Marianne or be deceived by an Omer, or underestimate what he's doing under the radar. So yeah, I think you're right.
I think that the way this season played out was one of the better ways for a season to play out for Mike.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't quite enough. So that leaves us with Marianne, our winner. It's interesting. It's interesting. So we're rating Marianne as a winner. We're also rating Marianne for like how she played in this episode. And I think that I don't think she played perfectly in the episode. Obviously, starts out wanting to take Lindsay. I think that's sort of not ideal. And I think the only like tangible mistake you can say she made in the episode was that she actively sabotaged the riddle so that Lindsay could get the advantage, because that's not something that she was in control of. If Lindsay ends up winning that immunity, she's now, because like we talked about, like if she uses the idol to save Lindsay, she looks like she tricked Mike. It was her play. Like that's one thing. If Lindsay wins that immunity and has nothing to do with Marianne has to play her idol on herself at Final 5. And she doesn't have that bomb to drop. And now Lindsay's there at Final 4. Maybe Lindsay wins Final 4 immunity. Maybe Lindsay gets to the Final 3. Lindsay now has a much better chance. I mean, Lindsay's going to perform a lot better than Mike in Final Tribal, I think. It's a much worse position. So I think that's the tangible mistake we can say that Marianne made. But then as soon as she realized, like Lindsay loses immunity and Marianne realizes can't go to the end with Lindsay, I think she pretty much plays it flawlessly.
I agree.
Getting Romeo to take her to the end, great. The performance of Final Tribal, fantastic. Dropping the immunity idol, choosing not to play the immunity idol. Every bit of it was top notch. And I think that she has one of the, there's been 42 of them. So quite a lot of Final Tribal performances, and many of them have 3 people each, right? So there's a lot to choose from. But in recent memory, and in my head, I think she has one of the best Final Tribal performances. So I'm really high on Marianne. I think for myself, I'm gonna go with a 9 for Marianne in this episode. I feel like barring the hiccup at the start, I think pretty much flawless. Maybe relied a little bit on luck. She has to probably make fire if Jonathan or Mike wins Final 4 immunity, but most people have to rely on luck. So I think a 9 fits for me.
I agree. I was going to go with a 9 too. I was thinking, was it flawless? And you're right that, well, she corrected the mistake on Lindsay, not before she made the active choice to get her that advantage. So, and when you think about Marianne's Final Tribal performance, honestly, how high she ranks really depends on how much you believe that Mike had that many votes going in, right? Because if he did, it really is an all-time. I cannot think of many people who have gone into the Tribal and been not had the majority of the votes and then win 7-1 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that would just be an unbelievable and Mike did things wrong, but so much of it was because Marianne was doing things right. So if Mike really had the majority of the votes, it's got to be really, really close to the very, very top. And again, it being up in the air, that's why people always say Todd Herzog has one of the great Final Tribal performances. It's not just because he did so well. It's because a lot of people thought Amanda had a real shot going into it. Courtney wound up doing really well and got a couple votes, so that's another reason why sometimes what position you were in, if you were actually in not an amazing position going in and win, that can enhance if you're looking just at Final Tribal in a bubble.
Yeah. And I think Final Tribal, like if we're rating the Final Tribal performance alone, I think that's a 10. I think it's about as good as it gets, So really, really impressive finish from Marianne. I think, we've done this for two seasons now. I think I gave Erica like an 8 last season. So I think Marianne currently holds the highest winner rating so far.
Last season sort of all depends on like with Ricard, right? Because there's a case to be made when we look at the Final 5 of 42. There's a case to be made that Marianne was beating any of them. We still don't know that she couldn't have outtalked Lindsay, right? My memory of 41 was that Ricard, if he had won immunity at 5 and could have beaten Erica, right? So
I think so, and it's also I think unfairly Erica is penalized with just not being as present in the edit, and so just not knowing as much about what she did. Whereas like we can very tangibly see what Marianne did to get there. I think that it's the difference in ratings there could just be a case of just the difference in the edit, but I think they both had very impressive finishes for sure.
Totally. I mean, they both did the thing that we talked about, right? Both Erica and Marianne were very self-aware about what they needed to do at Tribal. And look, it seemed like Erica pretty much had Xander anyway. As we said, Xander was more of a Jonathan figure where because of his age or whatever, just wasn't quite able. So it's not quite as impressive, I guess, as Marianne. Mike, it seemed like had a real shot. But regardless, it's very similar final Tribals, right? Where Erica and Marianne both came in with all the right reads, poise, the correct kind of response, and that they were both confident but also willing to admit mistakes, and a lot of their competition were not able to do that. So they're very similar in the virtues that they had at the end.
Yeah. All right, that's it. We did it. Only 5 ratings here. That's the Survivor 42 Stockwatch. We got through. It was let me say it was a tough one. Going alongside a Big Brother season. But we got through it. So Circle came up. It was a lot of other things happening, but we got through it. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And this was a fun season of the show. It makes me excited to again, even just seeing that little bit of 43. It just I feel like it looks like another really interesting cast, and some fun little quotes from people. So we'll see if it turns out. I have high hopes.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get another one.
Want to give me another one? No. Okay. That's it. All right.
That's it. Sorry, guys. That's no more 42 podcasts.
That's it.
All right. Anything else you wanted to bring up, Brendan?
No. I mean, thanks again for having me on, man. I feel like we talked a lot of different aspects of the episode. Oh, the one thing that I forgot to say that I laughed at the episode was when Jonathan shows up at the final immunity challenge and he goes, "It all comes down to this." And I thought, but it doesn't, because there's 5, dude. Like it, like that. Just I laughed at that one. It's like he's like, "It's all coming down to this." I was like, it doesn't anymore, And so it's interesting. We'll see how it keeps going. I'm really interested to see when we get, because like I was saying, thinking about it today, I was like, I'm fascinated by the fact that the first 3 fire challenges were the winner of the fire challenge won, and the most recent 3 are the person that was taken. I'm interested to see, if there's any, if it continues in any particular direction or what happens. I'm really interested to see, how that goes, because that's one of the only big aspects of the show. Like it or not, it's now a key part of the end game, and we have such a small sample size of it still. So it'll be interesting to see.
I think I think 43 has either finished filming or is currently filming. So I don't think they will have seen the ending of 42. Obviously they will have seen 41, but they won't have seen like the back-to-back kind of like you take this person, they win. So we may not see a huge impact. But certainly if the trend continues, I think we could see this. The meta of the fire making challenge is definitely evolving.
Yeah,
which is
for
interesting.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, that's what we have for you today. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. You can, of course, find me over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taran Armstrong, hanging out, watching episodes live. I'll be watching Big Brother when it starts, and the challenges show called the Traders or something like that. It's gonna have Suri on it. Super pumped about that. So I'm sure we'll try to watch that when it comes out as well. So come find me over there on Twitch. Hit the follow button. You'll be alerted when I go live. If you want to be alerted about those things. You can also find me on Twitter at ArmstrongTaran, and I'll let you know what I'm up to there as well. Brendan, what have you got going on? Where can people find you?
You can find me at Brendan KJ Meyer on Twitter and Instagram. I directed a short film and put that up recently on YouTube. So there's links to that and on my Twitter and on my Instagram. So there's that. And then, I did a couple movies last year, still waiting to see where they're going to wind up. One of them I think is going to be on Shudder at some point this year, the streaming service. And the other one maybe at some festivals. So we'll see. Yeah, I got a couple different films that are hopefully going to be out there this year sometime, but I don't know yet when. So follow me on Twitter and Instagram for that.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you all again so much for joining us here today. And I will see all of you next season.
All right.